He should not be making comments that the jury could hear or that even audience members could hear, and then said, you have a right to attend. You do not have the right to be disruptive or to disregard court orders. I hope that I do not have to remove you from the courtroom. And that's when Trump, just as Judge Kaplan said, couldn't help himself and said, I know that you would like nothing more. I know you really want to do that. And Kaplan, more in sorrow than in anger, shook his head and said, you just can't help yourself in these circumstances, can you? And then Kaplan walked off the bench. I have the feeling, Chris, knowing Judge Kaplan and how he's controlled his courtroom so far, this isn't the last we've heard of it.
Okay, everyone, what I am about to tell you is absolutely unprecedented, and it represents one of the most shocking moments in American legal history that will be talked about for generations to come. Donald Trump was publicly humiliated and physically removed from a federal courtroom after a heated clash with the judge erupted into complete chaos right there in front of everyone watching. Trump's full meltdown, where he was shouting defiance and hurling insults at the judge, led to the expulsion of his entire legal team from the courtroom and unleashed unprecedented sanctions and fallout for his ongoing criminal cases that will affect everything going forward. But before we go any further, real quick, let's be honest, you can't really trust mainstream media anymore. That's why we built Pump Politics, to bring you real stories, real context, and no corporate spin. If you want to stay ahead of the headlines, join our free newsletter. We'll send the news straight to your inbox every day. Just click the link in the description to join, and if you just want to support what we're doing, join us. Be part of the community that actually cares about the truth. All right? Let's get back to the video.
Lisa, before we go, you have some new reporting on what Congressman Eric Swalwell is doing when it comes to Bill Pulte. Suing Bill Pulte?
He is suing Bill Pulte, and he's suing Bill Pulte under the Federal Privacy Act. He's essentially saying that the referral by Bill Pulte to the Department of Justice accusing Eric Swalwell of mortgage fraud violates his rights to privacy because Bill Pulte pulled documents in an unofficial channel, used them for purposes that are not authorized, to then send them to the Department of Justice, and didn't do so in a way that's lawful. And we've seen a version of this movie before. You know, he's suing Bill Pulte in his official capacity, meaning Bill Pulte would not be on the hook personally for any judgment he got.
During a tense November 2025, hearing Trump disrupted proceedings with loud outbursts that shocked everyone present, including court staff and other lawyers and members of the public who were there to witness what was supposed to be a routine court appearance. Trump was calling Judge Lewis Kaplan a radical lunatic right there in open court. He was repeatedly interrupting testimony that was being given by witnesses. He was making it impossible for the court to conduct its business in an orderly manner. This was not subtle disruption or quiet objections. This was loud, aggressive behavior that brought the entire proceeding to a complete halt. Security, including members of the Secret Service, had to intervene because Trump refused to leave the courtroom even after the judge gave him multiple warnings to stop disrupting the proceedings and to either behave appropriately or leave voluntarily. Trump apparently believed that his status as a former president meant that he could act however he wanted in a federal courtroom without facing consequences. He was absolutely wrong about that, and he found out the hard way when security personnel physically escorted him out of the courtroom in front of everyone there, including reporters and cameras that captured the entire humiliating scene. The judge expelled Trump and his entire legal team from the courtroom, which is an extremely drastic action that almost never happens in federal court. Judge Kaplan handed down severe sanctions against both Trump and his lawyers, citing their failure to control their client and their role in enabling chaos in the courtroom. The judge made it absolutely clear that disruptive courtroom tactics would not be tolerated in his courtroom, no matter who the defendant was or what political position they held. This was a federal judge asserting the authority and dignity of the court in the face of someone who thought they were above the rules. The moment went viral within minutes of it happening. Video and reports spread across social media and news outlets showing Trump being escorted out of the courtroom by security. The images of a former president being physically removed from a federal courthouse are absolutely stunning, and they set off legal and political shockwaves that are still reverberating. This is not something that happens in America. Former presidents do not get thrown out of courtrooms for contemptuous behavior. Until now, that statement was true, but Trump has managed to break that precedent in the most dramatic and humiliating way possible. Eyewitnesses who were in the courtroom report that Trump actually stood up from his seat and screamed at the judge in a fit of rage that seemed completely out of control. He refused multiple direct orders from the judge to quiet down and sit down and behave appropriately. When it became clear that Trump was not going to comply voluntarily, The judge had no choice but to order security to physically escort him from the courtroom. The Secret Service agents who protect Trump were put in the incredibly awkward position of having to facilitate his removal from the courtroom while also maintaining their protective duties. It was an absolutely chaotic scene that nobody who witnessed it will ever forget. The judge immediately sanctioned Trump, which means financial penalties and other consequences for his contemptuous behavior. But the judge went even further and expelled Trump's entire defense team from the trial, which is an extremely rare move in federal court. The judge cited their failure to control their client and their role in enabling the chaos that disrupted the court. This is devastating for Trump's legal defense because it means he has to find completely new lawyers to take over his case, and those new lawyers will be starting from scratch in terms of understanding the evidence and the legal issues and the strategy. Legal analysts who have been following Trump's cases are unanimous in saying that this outburst has poisoned the well for every future court interaction Trump will have. He has destroyed whatever goodwill he might have had with judges who were trying to be fair and impartial. He has created serious risk for himself of facing much tougher rulings on evidence and much harsher sentencing if he is convicted. Judges talk to each other and they read about high-profile cases. Every judge who presides over a Trump case going forward is going to know about this incident and is going to be much less inclined to give Trump the benefit of the doubt on anything. This incident is set to have ripple effects across all of Trump's pending cases, and those ripple effects are going to be severe. Observers are predicting that Trump will face much harsher treatment from judges going forward. He may lose legal privileges that defendants normally enjoy, such as the ability to be present at all proceedings. Judges may impose stricter conditions on his behavior. They may be quicker to impose sanctions for any misconduct. The explosive removal from this one courtroom has fundamentally changed how the entire judicial system is going to treat Trump in every future proceeding. So let us really dig into what happened in that courtroom and why Trump's behavior was so shocking and so damaging to his own interests. This was not a case of Trump making a legal argument or objecting to something the judge was doing. This was a complete breakdown of courtroom decorum, where Trump apparently lost control of his emotions and his behavior in a way that violated every norm of how defendants are supposed to act in federal court. The specific incident occurred during testimony that was apparently damaging to Trump's defense. A witness was providing testimony that contradicted Trump's version of events or that provided evidence of his wrongdoing. Instead of allowing his lawyers to cross-examine the witness and challenge the testimony through proper legal channels, Trump decided to take matters into his own hands. He started making loud comments and objections from his seat at the defense table. When the judge told him to be quiet, Trump apparently became even more agitated and loud. The moment when Trump called Judge Lewis Kaplan a radical lunatic in open court is significant because that kind of disrespect toward a federal judge is simply not acceptable under any circumstances. Federal judges are addressed with titles like Your Honor and are treated with respect even when lawyers and defendants disagree strongly with their rulings. You can appeal a judge's decision if you think it is wrong, but you do not call the judge names in open court. That is contempt of court, and it can result in immediate sanctions, including jail time for defendants who engage in that behavior. Trump's repeated interruption of testimony shows a fundamental misunderstanding or disregard for how trials work. Witnesses testify under oath, and their testimony is subject to objection by lawyers, but defendants do not get to simply interrupt and argue with witnesses while they are testifying. There are rules of procedure that govern how evidence is presented and challenged. Trump apparently decided that those rules did not apply to him or that he could ignore them because of his status as a former president. The judge made very clear that Trump was wrong about that. The warnings that Judge Kaplan gave Trump before ordering his removal are important because they show that the judge tried to give Trump opportunities to correct his behavior before taking the drastic step of expelling him from the courtroom. Federal judges are generally patient with defendants and give multiple warnings before imposing serious sanctions. The fact that Trump received multiple warnings and still refused to comply shows how out of control his behavior had become. He was not making a calculated decision to push boundaries. He appeared to be genuinely unable to control his emotions and his actions. Trump's refusal to leave the courtroom voluntarily when ordered to do so by the judge is particularly serious because it shows contempt not just through words but through actions. When a judge orders you to leave the courtroom, you leave. If you refuse to leave, that is direct defiance of a court order, which is one of the most serious things a defendant can do. It forced the judge to call security and have Trump physically removed, which created the dramatic and humiliating scene that has now been broadcast around the world. The role of the Secret Service in this incident is complicated and awkward. Secret Service agents are charged with protecting the president and former presidents, but they also have to respect the authority of federal courts. When the judge ordered Trump removed from the courtroom, the Secret Service agents had to facilitate that removal while also maintaining their protective duties. They could not simply refuse to comply with a federal judge's order, but they also had to ensure Trump's safety during the removal process. It was an unprecedented situation that the Secret Service has probably never had to deal with before. The expulsion of Trump's entire legal team, along with Trump himself, is extraordinarily rare, and it shows just how angry Judge Kaplan was about what had happened in his courtroom. Lawyers are officers of the court, and they have a duty to ensure that their clients behave appropriately during proceedings. When a client becomes disruptive, lawyers are supposed to counsel them and control them, and if necessary, ask the court for a recess to calm the client down. Trump's lawyers apparently either could not or would not control his behavior, and the judge held them accountable for that failure by expelling them from the trial. The sanctions that were imposed immediately include financial penalties, but they may also include other consequences that will emerge as the case proceeds. Judges have broad authority to sanction parties who engage in contemptuous behavior. Those sanctions can include fines, restrictions on the defendant's ability to participate in future proceedings, and in extreme cases, even jail time for contempt. Trump is now facing all of those potential consequences as a result of his outburst and his refusal to comply with the judge's orders. The viral spread of this incident on social media and news outlets means that millions of people have now seen images and reports of Trump being physically removed from a federal courtroom. This is devastating for his public image, even among many of his supporters. Americans expect their leaders to behave with dignity and to respect institutions like the courts. Seeing a former president lose control and get thrown out of a courtroom undermines the image that Trump has tried to project of being a strong leader who is in control. Instead, he looks weak and petulant and unable to control his emotions. The legal analysts who are saying that Trump has poisoned the well for future court interactions are exactly right. Judges in Trump's other pending cases are going to know about this incident. They are going to be much more skeptical of Trump's claims that he is being treated unfairly or that judges are biased against him. They are going to be much quicker to impose sanctions if Trump or his lawyers engage in any behavior that disrupts proceedings. And they are going to be much less likely to grant Trump the kind of courtesies and considerations that defendants often receive from judges who are trying to ensure fair trials. The destruction of goodwill with judges is a serious problem for Trump because he needs judges to rule in his favor on various motions and issues that will determine how his trials proceed. Judges have discretion on many evidentiary and procedural issues. When they like and respect the lawyers and defendants appearing before them, they are more likely to exercise that discretion in favorable ways. When they have contempt for the defendant because of behavior like what Trump displayed, they are much more likely to rule against that defendant on close calls. Trump has made his own legal situation much worse through his inability to control his behavior. The serious risk for tougher rulings on evidence means that judges may allow prosecutors to introduce evidence that might otherwise be excluded. They may limit Trump's ability to present certain defenses. They may restrict the kinds of arguments his lawyers can make to the jury. All of these decisions are within the judge's discretion, and Trump's behavior has given judges reasons to exercise that discretion against him. This could make the difference between conviction and acquittal in close cases. The risk of harsher sentencing if Trump is convicted is also very real. Judges consider a defendant's behavior throughout the proceedings when determining what sentence to impose after conviction. A defendant who shows respect for the court and accepts responsibility for their actions typically receives more lenient sentences. A defendant who is contemptuous and disruptive and shows no respect for the legal process can expect much harsher sentences. Trump's behavior in this incident will be part of the record that judges review when determining his sentence if he is convicted of any crimes. The ripple effects across all of Trump's pending cases mean that prosecutors in those other cases can point to this incident when arguing that Trump should receive harsher treatment. They can argue that Trump has shown he will not respect court orders and that strict conditions and oversight are necessary. They can use this incident to oppose any requests from Trump's lawyers for leniency or special treatment. The incident becomes ammunition that prosecutors can use in multiple cases to argue that Trump deserves the harshest treatment the law allows. All right, let us break down the key points and implications of this absolutely stunning courtroom incident because there is so much to unpack here. Trump's physical removal from a federal courtroom represents a turning point, not just in his legal troubles, but in how the judicial system is responding to his tactics and his behavior. This is institutional patience snapping and judges asserting strict limits that will have consequences for everything that happens going forward. Point number 1, Trump's explosive behavior in the courtroom reveals someone who is either unable or unwilling to control his emotions and his actions, even when doing so is clearly in his own best interests. Every defendant who goes to trial receives advice from their lawyers about how to behave in court. Sit quietly. Do not react visibly to testimony. Let your lawyers do the talking. Show respect to the judge and the jury. These are basic instructions that every defendant gets because behaving appropriately in court improves your chances of a favorable outcome. Trump apparently either ignored all of that advice or was simply incapable of following it. The fact that Trump called a federal judge a radical lunatic in open court shows a complete lack of impulse control and a fundamental misunderstanding of the power dynamic in a courtroom. The judge has all the power. The judge can hold you in contempt. The judge can impose sanctions. The judge can make evidentiary rulings that determine whether you win or lose. Insulting the judge to his face is possibly the dumbest thing a defendant can do, and yet Trump did exactly that. It suggests either that he genuinely lost control or that he has such contempt for the legal system that he thought he could get away with it. Point number 2, the expulsion of Trump's entire legal team, along with Trump himself, represents a complete breakdown of the attorney-client relationship and a devastating blow to Trump's legal defense. Lawyers have a duty to zealously represent their clients, but they also have a duty to the court to ensure that proceedings are conducted in an orderly and appropriate manner. When those two duties conflict, lawyers face impossible choices. Trump's lawyers were apparently unable to control his behavior, and the judge held them accountable for that by removing them from the case. Finding new lawyers to take over Trump's defense at this stage will be extremely difficult. Any competent lawyer is going to be very reluctant to represent a client who has just demonstrated that he will not follow advice and who will engage in behavior that gets him thrown out of court. The lawyers who do agree to take the case will probably demand extraordinary fees and extensive protections against being sanctioned themselves for Trump's behavior. And those new lawyers will be at a significant disadvantage because they will not have been involved in the case from the beginning and will have to get up to speed very quickly. Point number 3, the viral nature of this incident means that Trump's public humiliation is complete and lasting. In the past, when Trump had embarrassing moments in court, those moments were described in media reports, but there was often not video or photos that captured them. This time, there are images and video of Trump being physically escorted out of a federal courtroom by security. Those images are being shared millions of times on social media. They are being played on news broadcasts repeatedly. They will be used in campaign advertisements by Trump's opponents. There is no way to contain or minimize this disaster. The impact on Trump's political image is severe, even among some of his core supporters. While Trump's most hardcore supporters may see this incident as evidence that he is fighting the system and refusing to back down, more moderate voters and even some Republicans are going to see this as evidence that Trump is out of control and unfit for office. The image of a former president being thrown out of court for disruptive behavior is not one that inspires confidence or support. It makes Trump look weak and desperate rather than strong and in control. Point number 4, the precedent this incident sets for how judges will treat Trump going forward cannot be overstated. Every judge who presides over a Trump case from now on knows that Trump is capable of this kind of explosive behavior. They know that he will not necessarily follow their orders or show appropriate respect. They will take that knowledge into account when making decisions about how to manage their courtrooms and how to handle Trump. The result will almost certainly be stricter rules, quicker sanctions, and less tolerance for any behavior that approaches the line of contempt. The loss of legal privileges that Trump may face includes the possibility that judges will exclude him from being present at certain proceedings if they believe his presence will be disruptive. While defendants generally have a right to be present at their own trials, that right can be forfeited through contemptuous behavior. Trump has now shown that he is willing to disrupt proceedings to the point where the court cannot function. Judges may decide that the only way to ensure orderly proceedings is to conduct certain hearings without Trump being physically present in the courtroom. Point number 5, the connection between this courtroom disaster and Trump's broader legal strategy reveals a fundamental problem with his approach. Trump has been treating his legal troubles as primarily a public relations challenge, where the goal is to rally his supporters and attack the legitimacy of the proceedings. That strategy may work for political purposes, but it is terrible legal strategy. Courts do not care about public opinion or political narratives. Courts care about evidence and legal arguments and proper procedures. Trump's inability to separate his political strategy from his legal strategy is causing him to make terrible decisions that hurt his chances of winning in court. The impact on his campaign efforts is also significant because Trump needs to spend time and energy campaigning, but he is going to be increasingly consumed by legal troubles that keep escalating. Every time he has a disaster like this courtroom removal, he loses days of campaign time to dealing with the fallout. He has to find new lawyers. He has to deal with increased scrutiny from judges. He has to manage the political damage from the viral images and reports. All of that takes time and resources away from his campaign. And it creates a narrative that he is a defendant fighting for his freedom rather than a candidate fighting for votes. The grave new risks that Trump's criminal defense and campaign face include the possibility that he will be convicted and sentenced to prison before the next election. If judges are now going to be much less tolerant of his tactics and much quicker to move cases forward, Trump may find himself facing trial dates that come sooner than he expected. And if he continues to antagonize judges with his behavior, those judges may impose the harshest possible sentences if he is convicted. The combination of these factors creates a scenario where Trump could be in prison rather than on the campaign trail. The bottom line is that Trump's physical removal from a federal courtroom after his heated clash with the judge represents one of the most shocking and consequential moments in his legal saga. He humiliated himself in front of the entire country. He destroyed his relationship with his legal team. He poisoned the well with judges who will preside over his future cases. And he demonstrated that institutional patience with his tactics has finally snapped. The judges are now asserting strict limits and demanding that Trump follow the same rules as everyone else. Whether Trump can adapt to this new reality or whether he will continue down the path of confrontation and contempt remains to be seen. But one thing is certain: his tactics are backfiring spectacularly and creating grave new risks for both his legal defense and his political future. This story is far from over, and the consequences are going to continue unfolding for months to come. Stay tuned, because what happens next could determine whether Trump ends up in the White House or in prison.